Hello and welcome to Audiobook Connection, behind the scenes with the creative teams. I'm Becky Parker Geist and I'm your host. Audiobook Connection is your place to learn about the audiobook creative process and for authors to learn valuable tips on producing and marketing your audiobooks. This podcast is sponsored by Pro Audio Voices, helping great stories come alive through audiobook production and marketing. Thanks so much for joining me today. Today, I'd like to talk about why you might choose a full cast option for your audiobook. What are some of the reasons why you might consider doing such a thing? They do tend to be, are almost certainly going to be more expensive to produce. So let's talk about some of the reasons why that expense might be worth it. If you've been following my podcast or know me at all, you'll probably be aware that full cast projects are one of my very favorite kinds of projects to work on. I come from a theater background as an actor, and that's how I got started in the audiobook world. That all began back in 1981 when one of my first jobs after getting my MFA in acting was talking books for the blind, where I had the great privilege and honor of recording as a contracted narrator and then as an employee of American Printing House for the Blind to record all kinds of work, written material for the blind community. And it was everything from children's book to a Morse code manual to magazine articles to novels, just a full range of materials. Now, that is where I got started. And since then, of course, that's many, many years ago now, I've had the great delight to work on a wide range of audiobook projects. And our company, Pro Audio Voices, really specializes in full cast projects and both audiobooks as well as podcasts. But we didn't start there. We started off really specializing in single narrator projects. And over the many years that we've been in business, so it's been almost 11 years now since I started Pro Audio Voices officially. And over those years, our craft and skills and team have all developed and grown. And now we're in a position where we have really developed some wonderful systems to make the production of full cast projects both economically reasonable, feasible, and also artistically really successful and delightful, both from the listener point of view and also throughout the whole creative process. So when we're talking with authors about their work, about their manuscripts, there are some specific things that we look for if there is an interest in or if we feel like it would be good recommendation to do a full cast project. One of the first things is about the amount of dialogue that is a part of the manuscript. Manuscripts that are dialogue heavy, that, really rely a lot on the dialogue to tell the story, tend to be really good candidates for full cast productions. Another aspect that we look at as sort of a critical issue or factor when it comes to full cast is how many characters are doing the speaking in the dialogue. The more different characters you have, especially within a given scene, the more the listener is going to benefit and the whole experience will be enhanced by having multiple narrators who are performing that dialogue. Why is that? That's because while some narrators are pretty good at differentiating their voices from one character to another, the more different characters required in a scene to create that differentiation, the harder it becomes. then the talent pool who can pull that off really effectively narrows, right? So, of course, we want a really effective listening experience, a really positive listening experience where the listener knows exactly who's talking, which character is talking, so that you don't have that little momentary being taken out of the story because you're not sure who's talking. I, as a listener, have had this experience. In fact, one of the very first audiobooks that I listened to just as a listener, not as somebody who was, had already been narrating audiobooks, but I'm talking about from the first time, like I became a subscriber and started listening to other people's audiobooks. And actually, it was an audiobook by a very famous film actor. And there were many times within that audiobook that I had to stop and go back several seconds and listen again multiple times to try to figure out who said that line, because it really would change the story if one character was saying it versus the other character. It was like a two-person scene that I'm thinking of right now, and I couldn't tell because the narrator wasn't giving me enough of a differentiation between those two voices. And so I was just played it over and over again to try to figure it out because it would change the story depending upon who actually said that line. So we don't want to have that experience as a listener, and we don't want to provide that experience as an author or an audiobook producer or even a narrator. Because when we're taken out of the story, then we lose something. One of the great things about audiobooks is how we can just get immersed in the story. They carry us away to another world. We escape into this other world, and we're living in that world. And that experience of immersion is the kind of experience that then allows us to get the greatest benefit from the experience, whether that's an escape or whether that's coming to better understand an emotional response to a situation, or whether it's to better understand a certain way that this character who is of a different culture understands or approaches a situation. There are so many different ways in which we learn and grow ourselves through the experience of getting immersed into an audiobook. So, it's really beneficial. It is one of the best things that we can do is to create an audiobook experience where we're fully immersing our listeners and we keep them engaged. And we don't have any of these little momentary, who said that? Which character was that? Where that we're pulling them out of the story, even briefly. And it is because of this, and with the intention of keeping our listeners fully engaged in the story, that we explore these ideas of should we use a full cast, or can we achieve that with a single narrator? Or on occasion, with multiple narrators, potentially even one reading all the male voices, one reading all the female voices, if both of those actors are really good at differentiating their voices between characters, and they're not frequently reading against each other. In other words, they're playing more than one character in the same scene. So there are many ways to have this full cast experience without it necessarily meaning that you have one actor for each character in the story. There are a lot of things that we're looking at. We're looking at who is in which scenes. In other words, the characters within each given scene. Who are they? How frequently are they in the story? Are they the one-off cab driver, or are they like the main protagonist? in which case, of course, you'd want a single actor for that main protagonist. And why is that? That is primarily, again, to keep the listener fully clear on who that voice is, so that when they hear that voice, they immediately know that is, the protagonist. That's our main character. And so in approaching any given project, these, again, are some of the things that we're looking at. How many characters are there typically in a given scene and overall in the audiobook? How skilled are the narrators at differentiating their voices enough that we can easily tell who's speaking? Is there so much dialogue in the book itself that the full cast option really makes sense? And will we, in fact, be delivering the very best, most engaging listening experience if we produce it as a full cast audiobook? Let's take a short pause, and when we come back, we're going to talk about some other reasons why you might choose to have multiple voices, and I'll differentiate between what I mean with that versus a full cast option. We'll be right back.
Do you have a book that you imagine with multiple voices, or a screenplay or stage play? At Pro Audio Voices, we love working on these more complex productions with music and sound effects and a full cast of voices. Bringing together decades of experience in both theatre and audio production, our team brings your project to life. From manuscript preparation to casting to directing the actors and a post-production team to bring it all together, Pro Audio Voices brings your project to life. Learn more at proaudiovoices.com/full-cast.
So I just wanted to touch on a couple marketing issues regarding having a full cast option. And then I'll also talk about some other multi-voiced projects, and why you might want to approach your audiobook in that way, and a few ways, and I'll refer to a few ways in which we have done that at Pro Audio Voices. So first of all, just from a marketing perspective, I want to call out and remind authors that those narrators that you include in the cast of your full cast project also have a stake in helping spread the word about your audiobook. All audiobook narrators want their work to be out there, their performances to be out there and getting to as many listeners as possible. So you can leverage that fact when you have a full cast and engage your cast with your marketing strategy as a part of your marketing strategy. Now, if you're working with Pro Audio Voices or you have signed up for Amplify audiobooks, this is a great way to use that platform and engage your full cast of actors and your production team to help spread the word. So basically, you could, as an example, you might offer a discount coupon to your cast members or even give it to them for free and ask them to then spread the word and to help you in your marketing efforts. The more tools you give them, the easier you'll make it for them. That might include images they could use. It might include any other kind of social media posts that you have already prepared, or it could be as simple as a special discount code for their followers. So maybe you give it to your narrators for free, but you offer to their followers that they could have 20% off or whatever works for you. So it's just a way to keep in mind that there are some additional benefits from having a full cast that even go beyond the production aspect and live on in the marketing part of your audiobook. If you have a podcast, you might also interview each member of your cast That would be a really fun way to have a whole series that are related back to your audiobook that you can advertise on your podcast. And you can also, if you're on Amplify Audiobooks, use a special code for your podcast followers. So there are just so many creative ways to leverage the fact that you've got a full cast audiobook even beyond production. Now let's shift over and talk about what a multi-voiced project that is not necessarily full cast. And first of all, let me define what I mean. When I refer to a full cast project, I'm referring to a scenario where multiple actors are playing different characters within scenes, and that the different actors are portraying and performing those characters, interacting with each other as we record the scenes that take place within the book. When I talk about a multi-voiced project, I'm talking about a scenario where there are many actors who are cast, but they're not in this interactive, interrelated scene kind of scenario. And that can play out like they're maybe doing alternate points of views. So one narrator is reading from a character's perspective, but they're reading the full chapter, including all of the dialogue. And then maybe another actor is reading from a different character point of view, but they read the whole chapter, including all of the dialogue. That's one version. Now let's talk a little bit about what a nonfiction multi-voiced project might look like and why we might choose that. Let's say, for example, we've got a book, and we did this with Gil Brose's book, where you've got a lot of just your main text, but then you have all these sidebars that are really like testimonials of clients. And in this case that we did with Gil's book, there were quite a lot of those sidebars, and they were an important part of the text. But we really wanted to create that feel of this is really that person talking to you, sharing their story. And so it makes it feel much more like we're hearing the real voice of the real person who's saying these words, right? The real testimonial, or what should I say, the real speaker of those testimonial words. And in that way, it gave us an opportunity to not have to use the words sidebar, end sidebar. It made it much more organic sounding. And so we were very mindful about the placement of where those testimonial quotes and stories would come in relation to the flow of the overall main body text. But we would have different voices, and we had male and female voices, and we made sure that the voices that were cast had different kinds of vocal qualities. Some would portray more than one of those people that were saying their testimonials, right? But they would differentiate their voice, and we would separate them from one part of the book and then have them reappear maybe with a slightly different voice later in the book so that it was not obvious that it was the same person. This was a way that we could bring to life that nonfiction text in an interesting way. We did a very similar approach with several of the Parkinson's Foundation projects, and we have produced 12 audiobooks so far for them using a similar approach. We wanted very much to have those testimonial stories from the text that we were provided. So these were quotes that were from people who have worked with Parkinson's Foundation. And then it comes across to the listener, it's much more believable as the real words of the real person rather than I'm quoting someone else. Do you see what I mean? So it feels more personal, more intimate, and therefore that connection, I think, becomes a little stronger between the listener and what they're hearing. Now, just as with fiction, in a full cast version, if we look at the marketing of the nonfiction, we have the same benefit happening. So the people who are in the cast, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, those people also have an interest in getting their voice work out there in the world, their performances. And so they are typically very open, especially when given the tools to do it effectively. They're typically very open to getting the word out to their followers. And more professional voiceover talent have developed followings of their own and will do social media promotions, have an email newsletter. They're often doing many things to grow their own following. And so you, as the author or rights holder, can take advantage of that benefit. Why not? Right? And again, Amplify Audiobooks is going to provide the tools for you to be able to do that effectively. And I think we'll call that a wrap for today. So if you have questions about your project and whether using multiple voices would be a benefit for your project, let's talk. If you just go to proaudiovoices.com, you can click on Get Started or on the contact page and schedule a free call with us. And we can talk about what your aims are, what your big picture goals are, as well as whether this might be a good fit for you, a good approach for you, either full cast or multiple voices. Thanks so much for joining me today. I look forward to hearing from you. Please do reach out to us at proaudiovoices.com. And just a reminder that we do have a Patreon account, so if I'm providing value that is helpful to you and you would like to give back and show your appreciation, that would be awesome. We are at patreon.com/audiobook connection podcast. Again, thank you for joining me today. Thanks for joining us for Audiobook Connection, behind the scenes with the creative teams. Please take a moment to subscribe at audiobookconnection.com. The podcast is sponsored by Pro Audio Voices, helping great stories come alive through audiobook production and marketing. Learn more at proaudiovoices.com. Again, thanks for being with us, and please join us next week.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.